So I don't usually have issues with toilets. I use toilets regularly. This is the sort of thing I've had down for as long as I can remember. I never thought it'd have to be sort of washroom calamity I'm now telling you about, considering I literally shit in a toilet's mouth every day. This is true. I use the handicap stall whenever possible because, much the same as anyone else who does, I'm a terrible person. Barring those who are actually handicapped, much to my chagrin, emotional handicaps don't qualify. I have a better time in the larger stalls. There's more room. There's a baby changing station for me to use as a workstation if I'm in it for the long haul. And there's a sense of importance I get that I'm neglected by my peers in everyday life. Touching cheeks to the handicap reserve toilet feels like coming home. Unlike home, though, I don't host visitors in my handicap stall. So when I heard a knock on the door of my lavatory domicile, I was quite startled and scared shitless. But only due to the fact that I was simultaneously scared and literally shitless at that point in my defecatory journey. The knock came at the point in my water closet therapy when I have not yet begun wiping, but have altogether completed my movement. It's a quaint downtime period, an amount of time between 2 and 15 minutes, accompanied usually by a smartphone screen filled with the latest meme digest, or, in lack of a smartphone, existentialism, because that's what shitting is about. I looked under the stall door at my visitor's shoes in an attempt to identify them. No luck. It's as if identifying someone by their shoes is nigh impossible or something. Regardless, through under the stall, I spied an irregular appearance. 1 leg and 4 wheels. Presumably a wheelchair. Presumably a man in a wheelchair. Presuming further, I was even in the correct place to begin with. But you know what they say about making presumptions. They say don't. They say not to. It's not in the story. I'm just letting you guys know. I was suddenly faced with a new and terrible reality. Not that I had done anything wrong, but that I had been caught doing something arguably wrong. I stated, the stall was occupied, then began to compress my memes and existentialism to begin wiping. A grunt came from the other side of the door in acknowledgement of my statement and presumably, don't do it, and presumably contempt of my existence. Accompanying the grunt was a gasp of dread, a sucking in of air of which I do not recommend committing in a public bathroom. For obvious reasons. Dread, terror, and shame. There was no toilet paper. No, there was toilet paper. It was out of reach, locked inside the dispenser, imprisoned in a translucent plastic cage. The toilet paper called out for me to free it. Alas, I could not reach into the dispenser as it was constructed like a cruel vending machine with no obvious way to open it. The MacGyver in me said, use a knife in your pocket to pry open the dispenser. The barbarian in me said, punch it. How many punches does it take to get to the center of a toilet paper dispenser? I don't remember, but it did take about 5 punches to sprain my wrist. The sounds of my punching was accompanied by a medley of expletives from the one-legged, four-wheeled man as I felt his soul give up on me. As I wrestled, pugilized, and altogether molested the toilet paper dispenser, the one-legged man turned from my stall and entered the stall next to me. A normal stall. A stall so narrow You couldn't hardly turn around in it. So narrow, a bodybuilder would be trapped, wedged into the stall with his muscles for 127 hours. That's a long time. I'm not sure how the man wheeled his chair into the stall, but he did. Wedging large, rigid objects into tighter, smaller spaces is something I've seen done before, usually in the more questionable, yet highly frequented corners of the internet that every man is hesitant to admit he's bookmarked. The one-legged man penetrated the small bathroom stall with his big black chair and came inside it, slurring "fucks" and "shits" as he did in a tone of voice reminiscent of Tom Waits stubbing his toe, appropriately gravelled for the backdrop of crack, 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 crack. Finally, I opened the dispenser. Rather, I destroyed the dispenser. I obliterated the dispenser. Dispensers everywhere fear my wrath. And the toilet paper was mine. All mine. I'd never worked so hard for access to single ply before. Nor had my puckering orifice craved the contact of its sweet scruffiness. I wiped. Finished with the excrement excavation, I raised my pants. The one-legged man, having wheeled his chair into the stall, was mid-transfer, moving the mass of his 75%-ish body from his throne of disability to the throne of evacuation. I could tell because he was yelling at me, "You know how hard it is to do this shit? You know how hard it is to take a shit with one leg?" I admit, as someone who is 100% whole, and maybe a little more than that, I cannot appreciate the troubles of someone with one foot in the grave. Well, maybe not the grave, but I bet his other leg is in at least a hole in the ground somewhere. So then, standing with my pants up, the toilet began to auto-flush sequence. Down and down the water went. Then up and up it came, right back, filling faster and faster. The robo-toilet was not programmed for this. It kept flushing and raising its bowl sea level. Soon the bowl would be spilling the sewage onto the floor. It was chasing me. I had crossed the toilet gods and I had upset them. I had to get out of there. I walked briskly out of the stall, past the one-legged man who yelled at me, "What are you doing? Stop flushing the toilet." He stopped as he realized what was occurring. Soon the water was flowing under his stall, and I was leaving the room, exiting both the situation and the shit flood shit storm. Some may say it's a flaw in my character that I could have left a poor one-legged man to roll his way out of what could be referred to as Jurassic Park. I really like that joke. You guys should like that joke better. Jurassic Park, a room where the indigenous feces roam free over the wet floor and rising water levels. Some days, I wonder what happened to that man. I like to think he survived the flood that followed in my wake. Or if he didn't, if he drowned to his death, I like to think he's somewhere in the ether, looking down on me as my guardian, one-winged angel. Thanks.
Thoughts I had during the fifth verse of the Cupid Shuffle by Mona Malone. It's 5:57 p.m. I scamper past wedding coordinators and sneak into the ceremony. Of course I meant to be early, but life happens. I'm scampering quickly but carefully on the slick marble floors. I know both the bride and the groom, so do I sit on the left or on the right? I see some familiar faces on the left, but on the right are familiar faces I actually care to talk to, so I choose the groom's side. It's 5:59. I congratulate myself on having made it just in time. My congratulations turns into embarrassment and self-loathing when I notice that all of the men here are wearing tuxes and 80% of the women are in long dresses. Fuck. I hadn't read the invite well enough to notice that it said black tie. And here I am in a short dress and wedges. I feel too casual and out of place. I don't even like this dress. Why did I even wear this dress? This was the dress I was wearing the night I was raped. What? Did that take an unexpectedly dark turn that came out of nowhere and really brought the mood down? It probably did, because rape is an unexpectedly dark turn that comes out of nowhere and really brings the mood down. The night it happened was actually the first time I wore this dress, so I probably didn't throw it away because I'm cheap. I didn't wear it for 2 years after that, but recently I've been feeling like I would be reclaiming my power by wearing it again, which is cheesy but feels true to me. I've only worn it 3 times since. I have one friend who has been through the same thing. I should say that I have one friend that I know of. Statistically, we have more friends than we realize who this has happened to. What do they say? 1 in 4? She and I check in on each other. We ask each other about our self-care. We text each other on our anniversaries of those days. She texts me when she runs into him. I text her when I wear the dress. Since I was rushing to get here on time, I hadn't texted her yet. It's 6:05. The ceremony is late, and I have a moment to catch my breath and write in the wedding card I brought in my purse. I try to count. I think this is my 17th wedding. Everyone gets the same card. I have a stack of them at home, and everyone pretty much gets the same handwritten message inside, which is a quote I actually stole from a very touching father of the groom speech at a wedding 5 years ago. If there is a guest book or commemorative picture frame for me to sign later, I will, in all likelihood, write the same message. It's 6:09, and if I'm honest with myself, I don't know why I'm here. I was sort of surprised I was invited. I mean, the bride, groom, and I were friends in school and all, but not close friends. I used to work at the same place as the bride, but we rarely saw each other. And it was only after I got the invite to the wedding that I asked her to lunch because I felt like I needed to show some more effort here. At 6:15, the string quartet fires up and the bridesmaids sashay down the aisle. The last bridesmaid looks a lot like the bride, and I rack my brain trying to think if she has a sister. I feel like that knowledge should probably be a prerequisite to me sitting here at her black tie wedding. The groomsmen process in, and I see him. I didn't know he was that good of friends with the groom. It was a guy that we had gone to school with, the one who raped my friend. He's a slovenly, goofy man, very smart, decently witty, and in general seems pretty non-threatening. It makes me wonder what other goofy, well-liked, decent guys we know that have done the same 180 when they're alone with a woman and they say no. Even suggesting that makes people bristle and get defensive, but if statistically we know a lot of people who've been raped, then don't we statistically know a lot of people who have done the raping? Maybe that's another unexpectedly dark tangent, an otherwise mediocre wedding story, but that's about how often and how randomly it surfaces in my conscious mind after hours or days of lying dormant. The thought passes as quickly as it comes, and life keeps going, 1 minute to the next. It's 6:20. They wrote their own vows, which is refreshing after the number of Catholic weddings I've been to, where everyone recites the same robot vows they've been using since the dawn of time. They're very nervous, and their vows are heartfelt, and I start leaking feelings out of my eyeballs because I am a human. And of course I didn't bring any tissues, so I have to wipe my eyes with my fingers and rub my tears into the dress. At 6:30, they kiss, we clap, they jump the broom, which was a tradition I hadn't seen in my 16 previous weddings. And for those of you counting at home, that was a 15-minute wedding ceremony. the way God intended. And now it's time for cocktail hour. By 7:30, I have been sufficiently hounded by waiters with mediocre asparagus appetizers and my former colleagues trying to make small talk. I'm also on my third glass of champagne, for I am a classy broad. Between 8 and 9, I eat the best wedding food of my entire life. At dinner, we tell dating app war stories, much to the schadenfreude delight of the couples who got married before dating apps were a thing. Then we politely ask engaged and married people how they met, which is a great way to ensure that exactly 2 people at the table are interested in the conversation. During a toast, the best man says he loves the groom more than the best man loves his own wife. It's a joke, presumably, but I laugh at the sadness that maybe it's true. After the toast, the DJ opens up the dance floor, and no one moves. People encourage me to get out there and dance, but those same people sit firmly in their seats talking to their spouses. I start to wonder if this is my role here as the single friend/acquaintance. I feel like I'm here to be a gregarious court jester and give the bride's aunt a story for when she tells her friends about the wild wedding that she went to. I'm here to be empathetic to the bride's super drunk friend from 6th grade who doesn't know anyone else. I'm here to dance to every line dance song and to fill the space and make the dance floor look crowded so that when the couple looks at their wedding photos, they feel satisfied that their guests enjoyed themselves. I'm here to dance with such wild abandon that my Fitbit registers it as 43 minutes of aerobic workout. I'm here as a muse for the photographer who has easily taken 100 photos of me, including an ill-timed crotch shot from when I was going a little bit softer now during shout. These are my thoughts at 10:30 during the 5th verse of the Cupid Shuffle at this, the 17th wedding I've attended. These are the thoughts that flow through my brain when I'm pretending to still enjoy singing Spice Girls in a dance circle. This is what is on my mind when I do the wobble, feet away from my friend's rapist and his smiling wife, and pretending that it's all okay. I don't know what time it is anymore. We sing Don't Stop Believing, and we wave sparklers as they drive away. And life goes on. Thank you.
The Biggest Lebowski. Everyone has that one certain person in their life. Maybe they weren't there from the beginning, but it feels like they were. And more than that, it feels like they've been around before even the beginning of you. Like this ultra special friend was just hanging out, waiting for you to materialize from the ether so you could start hanging out. Sometimes you don't realize how important and integral to your life this friend is until you go through a rough time, or several rough times. And then you can't imagine how you ever did it without them. Sometimes this person serves as a balance for you. Sometimes this person is a voice of reason, or just the ultimate comfort when you feel your lowest. Sometimes this person isn't a person at all. Sometimes the friend that is all of these things and more is a dog. This particular friend, for me, came into my life about 11 years ago in the form of a small, white pit bull mixed pup I found wandering down a busy street near my parents' old house with a length of rope tied around his neck, dragging behind him as he walked. I pulled over. My girlfriend at the time and I hopped out and coaxed the little guy out of the street and into the car. He weighed about 20 or so pounds at the time and his white fur was damp and covered in mud. He was cold, swarming with fleas, and scared. So we took him straight home to clean him up, get him fed, and get him warm. My girlfriend and I were living together, and we already had a dog, and she suggested we put up signs near where we found him in case someone was looking for him. I already knew in my heart that I was keeping this dog because I was supposed to, but I reluctantly agreed. We put up a few found dog signs up at the end of the street, and while no one called, I did only leave them up a day and a half. I figured if somebody was looking for him, that it would be for the best that they didn't get him back, given the state that we found him in. When it became clear we were keeping him, it was time to give him a name, and it was my girlfriend who suggested the name Lebowski, because she knew it was my favorite movie, and because she knew that this was obviously the dog that was meant to be with me. Lebowski spent his first night with us sleeping in the garage since we were unsure of how far along he may or may not be in his potty training. I was pleasantly surprised in the morning to see that he hadn't gone to the bathroom in the garage at all. Lebowski followed me through the house so I could let him out into the backyard, but when I opened the door, he was no longer by my side. I turned around to see him squatting over the shag-style rug in the living room, squeezing out a wet, tremendous steamer. I realized that leaving him in the house with our other dog, Willy, while we were at work was no longer an option, so into the backyard he went. A storm moved in later that day, and it rained for the last 4 hours I was at work. All I could think of was that poor little pup all alone in my backyard in the pouring rain. I rushed home when I got off, walked in, threw open the door, and called out to a dog that didn't even know his name yet. What I expected was for an excited, wet puppy to jump into my arms or race past me, leaving a trail of muddy paw prints in his wake. What I got was nothing. I stepped out, struggling to see through the driving rain, scanned the yard, but he was nowhere to be seen. A feeling of dread rose from my stomach and threatened to manifest itself in the form of vomit as a sense of loss washed over me. I'd only had this dog for 24 hours and I'd already lost him. I walked out into the rain with my head on a swivel, hoping he would fall from the sky into my arms. When I got about halfway out, I looked to my right and saw a small ball of white fur cowering behind the shed in hopes of avoiding getting any more drenched. He picked his head up, saw me, ran to me, and I picked him up, not caring about how wet he was or how much mud was all over him, and kissed his head about 1,000,000 times on the way back inside. I dried him off, apologized profusely, and promised to never leave him out in the rain again. I sat on the couch. He jumped up next to me, walked a few circles, and plopped down so his back was touching my leg as he curled into this little ball of adorable. We both breathed deeply. I stroked his back as he fell asleep. That was when I knew. I knew that this little guy was meant to be with me, and I with him. A few years later, my girlfriend and I got married. We moved again, and went through what people refer to as life happening for several years, all the while my bosom buddy by my side every step of the way. Later on, I got divorced. I moved and basically had my entire life turned upside down without a clue as to how anyone could be prepared to handle something like this. The one constant in what was probably the worst and hardest part of my life was a little white pit bull named Lebowski. Just having him around helped me to realize that everything was going to be okay and I could get through this awful pain. He greeted me at the door every day, sat at my feet while I wrote my stupid stories, and slept by my side in my bed every night. About 2 months ago, Lebowski was diagnosed with kidney disease. It wasn't far advanced, and the vet seemed to think that we had detected it early enough we could right the ship. We immediately put him on some special food that we would add medication to. We also, twice a week, administered an intravenous saline solution to him as well. All of this was to balance out his enzyme levels, which his kidneys could no longer do on their own. He took to the treatment well. He was back to his old, normal, energetic self in a matter of days. From my perspective, we had this thing licked. On a Friday night, about 3 weeks ago, I got a call from my now fiancée, Katy, while I was loading my equipment into my car after a gig. "You have to come home right now," she said in a shaky voice. "Something is wrong with Lebowski. He's struggling to breathe and is unresponsive." I jumped into the car and rushed home, trying to convince myself along the way that she was mistaken, that I'd get home and everything would be fine. I burst through the door and found Katy kneeling over Lebowski in the hallway as he lay on his side, fighting for every small breath. I collapsed next to him, lifted his head onto my lap, and just broke down. I kept saying, "It's going to be okay, that you're going to be okay, and to please get up." I even begged him to snap out of it. Less than a minute later, his breathing slowed down more and more until his final gasp of air, and the life force that I love so dearly departed from him. I buried my face in his head and cried until his fur was soaked with my tears. I can honestly say I've never cried so much in my entire life. My boy, my precious angel, my constant, was gone. I wish I could tell you I picked myself back up and moved on after a couple days, but that would be a bold-faced lie. I will never get over his passing. But I have begun to make some semblance of peace with it. Lebowski was, for me, the one friend who I knew would always be in my corner, no matter what. And the fact that he's gone is a hard pill to swallow. I do take some stock in the fact that maybe one day just the thought of him will be all the comfort I need, but at the moment, it's a little hard to imagine. Rest in peace, my sweet boy. I love you.
Cool, make me follow the dead dog. Cool. Awesome, great. Designated Optimist. It was my mom's first day in a new nursing home, and I was pretty nervous about it, because the place did not seem to be in great shape from the outside. It kind of looked like if Ozzy Osbourne was a building. Just grimy and falling apart. And when I walked in, I immediately saw plaster flaking from the ceiling and stuffing coming out of the furniture. But there was this bird in the lobby, a cockatiel, and I thought, hey, my mom likes birds. I wonder if this one can talk. So I sat next to an old lady who was trying to coax it into speaking, and after about 20 minutes of cajoling, she did get it to say a few words. And one of the words it said was, help! I don't know if you've ever heard a cockatiel talk before, but it's not cute at all. It's profoundly creepy. They have these scratchy, almost otherworldly voices. They almost sound like they're transmitting someone else's scrambled message. So it was especially bone-chilling to hear it say, help! It didn't seem like a great sign for what this place might have in store. I quickly discovered why the bird knew the word help. This facility was home to lots of patients with dementia. And patients with dementia often wake up not knowing where they are and start calling, help, 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 over and over. And sometimes their cries for help will wake up other patients with dementia who will also start calling for help. You can go help them, but they'll usually forget you were there right after you leave, and sometimes they'll start right back up again. So at any time of the day or night in this place, there was a chorus of people crying for help. And this constant state of low-level alert had reduced the people who worked there into a bunch of burnt-out shells who seemed to resent the hell out of their jobs. With the exception of one person. There was this nurse named Marjorie who seemed to have the unofficial job title of Designated Optimist. And she stood out in this place like a Tigger in a world full of Eeyores. She had a permanent smile on her face that was so out of this so intense that it bordered on deranged, like Jack Nicholson in The Shining. And every day, she wore neon pink scrubs and ping-ponged around the facility like this manic pixie glow stick, passing out muffins, spearheading arts and crafts projects, making inside jokes with everyone and saying stuff like, okie dokie, and hey there, Mr. Man, without a trace of irony. I should have loved this person. I should have seen her as the life raft, the beacon of light in this quintessence of dark. But for some reason, she bugged the shit out of me. I'll tell you why. Imagine that in the span of 8 months, you'd watched your mom go from being a fully independent adult with a car and a job to wearing a diaper and eating pureed chicken with a special rubber fork. And imagine that no one ever took you aside to tell you this, but you were beginning to piece it together that she was not going to get better. And then imagine that midway through you realizing that, Elmo from Sesame Street kicked down the door with a disco ball in one hand and a boombox in the other and started trying to teach you how to dab. That is what Marjorie's presence in my life felt like. Her optimism was invasive, aggressive. It minimized and undercut the shittiness of my reality, like a neon pink gaslight of happiness. I couldn't be mad at her, because she was great at her job, and my mom loved her. And in a world of sickness and burnouts and creepy talking birds, you shouldn't turn your back on a source of niceness just because it's a little too nice for your taste. So I told myself, at some point, you need to let Marjorie know that you're thankful for all of this. And eventually I did. I just didn't pick a great time to do it. The night I decided to thank Marjorie was the night this massive storm hit. Other than Harvey, it's the biggest weather event in my recent memory. The high water outside started forcing cars onto the shoulder, and the wind sent waves of water crashing into the walls with enough force that it kind of felt like there was a medieval army charging our door with a battering ram. All the mayhem outside, as you might imagine, started to foment a similar kind of mayhem inside. Within minutes, more than half a dozen patients were calling for help, all at once. Others were crying, and one very confused old man wandered into my mom's room and sat on the spare bed opposite hers. We didn't bother him. He didn't bother us. We all just sat there, watching Guy Fieri's diners, drive-ins, and dives, wondering if everything would still be there in the morning. After about 40 minutes of intense wind and rain, a crack started forming on one of the lobby walls, and the staff had to put everything out of the room and use it to barricade entry to that part of the building, for fear that the roof might collapse. This is when the pandemonium really started to approach critical levels. Half the patients in the building collected into a mob in the den, getting swept up in the hysteria of panic, forming this cacophonous mass of pain and need. It's one of the scariest sights I've ever seen outside of a Tyson chicken factory. Some of the staff members just lost it. I watched one nurse's aide took a look at the mob of residents, say, and make a beeline for the break room. But Marjorie was not one to bail. She dove into the middle of it all like a paratrooper, unfazed, like it was any other day. And for maybe an hour, I watched her bounce from person to person, going, "Hey there, Mrs. Austin, can I help you? Hey there, Mrs. Julius, can I help you? Hey there, Mrs. Austin, can I help you again? Hey there, Mrs. Julius, can I help you again?" She was like Bill Murray at the end of Groundhog Day, embracing the absurdity of the situation in which she was trapped with this zen-like mastery. It's one of the few things I've ever witnessed firsthand that I have no problem calling heroic. So when she finally got around to visiting my mom's room, I told her that. I said, "Marjorie, you've been amazing tonight." She said, "Oh, stop." And I realized it was probably going to be a little difficult to get her to take a compliment. So I got in the way of her work for a second, and I made her look at me. And I said, "Listen, I know how hard you work here every day. And I know how little thanks you get. I know the people here sometimes yell at you, spit at you, and some of them don't even remember your name. But I do. And for what you've done for my mom, I always will. Thank you." And for maybe the first time ever, I saw Marjorie stop smiling. her face shifted into this strained expression. And I realized she was starting to tear up. I thought, wow, I guess she really needed to hear that. But then the tearing up quickly escalated into full-on red-faced sobbing. And then the full-on red-faced sobbing escalated into what could only be called a shit fit. Marjorie collapsed in my mom's chair and started letting loose these biblically eerie moans that sounded halfway between a banshee and a dying orca whale, just... It's like my words had opened up a floodgate behind her eyes, and now a pressurized current of liquefied despair was jetting out of her face with an intensity that almost matched the outside storms, and I thought, oh dear God, I broke Marjorie. And for maybe 10 minutes, we all just sat there and watched her fall apart. Me, my mom, the random old guy who was still sitting on the spare bed. And in between her sobs, we'd hear Guy Fieri on the TV go, Flavor Town! Then Marjorie got up, wordlessly sulked out, and that was the last I saw of her that night. After it happened, I started to realize the reason Marjorie's incessant positivity sometimes seemed at odds with the reality is because it was. Because to work in a place like that and to stay positive, one has to engage in a heavy amount of reality avoidance. I think Marjorie saw the world through the set of ultra-pleasant, sugar-coated glasses that she'd crafted for herself. They were her protection. And what I had done with my little speech was rip those safety glasses off of her face and force her to stare directly into the unfiltered reality of her world. It was like pulling an astronaut's helmet off in deep space. It was too much for her. But maybe the craziest part of all of this is when I saw her the next day, she didn't even address it. On the way past her in the halls, I started trying to apologize, and she cut me off with a startling amount of pep and said, "Hey there, sunshine." The subtext was clear enough to me. Underneath, "Hey there, sunshine," she was saying, "Please, would you just let me have my world?" So I did.
Girl problems.
The unfortunate reality of being a woman is that at some point in your life, you are going to be given the gift of sexual aggression. Usually from a man, or men, or boys who think they're men, maybe all of the above, who knows? The true beauty is that you don't get to pick who it is. It gets to be a total surprise. Along with when or where it happens, no matter what you might be going through at the time. Personally, being a woman, I have gotten to experience sexual male aggression in a variety of ways. From answering the phone at work and having a grunting, breathy man on the other side telling me how much he liked my voice, to middle-aged school officials giving me handshakes that were way too long for comfort, and then telling me how good I looked the other day when I was underage, to grown men making outright sexual advances towards me, also when I was underage. However, this is not a story about all those incidents. This is a story about a very specific incident. In June of 2013, I was traveling with my mom and older brother James to Reno, Nevada, where my brother would die shortly after our arrival. See, my brother had cancer, and although his death sentence came with his diagnosis 3 years prior, we were still holding out hope against all odds that he would miraculously beat it. He didn't. So here we are on I-10, driving through New Mexico in a minivan with my brother lying on a twin-size mattress in the back, me in the passenger seat, and my mom at the wheel. It was a 30-hour drive, and we traveled nonstop. My mom and I switched driving duty back and forth while the other napped. My brother periodically woke up to tell us how much pain he was in, only for us to tell him to take more of his Ativan and Haldol to knock his ass back out. To say this was a stressful trip is an understatement. Not only were we sleep deprived, but this was our Hail Mary pass to save my brother. We were taking him to an alternative medicine clinic because his oncologist would no longer do anything for him besides recommend hospice care, which he was already on. So again, here we are on the stretch of I-10, going through New Mexico. My mom is driving, and I notice a dark green truck, one lane over, keeping pace with us. I look over at the driver. It's a middle-aged white man. He is pasty, skinny, and bald. When I look over at him, he was looking back at me. And then he lifted his shirt and pressed his nipple against the glass of his driver's side window. I didn't know if he meant to be enticing, but I was not enticed. I immediately faced forward and tried hard not to glance back over, but I could still see my lonely friend one lane over, keeping pace. I told my mom to speed up. Why? I need you to pass this truck, I said. Why? She asked again, and as I saw her start to turn her head, Mom, don't look, I instructed. Oh my God, my mother exclaimed. And with that, I looked back over. I couldn't not. It was an involuntary reaction. My head twisted to the side, and that's when I saw it. My brother is dying in the back of this van, and here's this man's dick. His dick. Not only was his dick out, he was wagging it at us. He was wagging his flaccid, milky white dick at me and my mom. I don't even know how the logistics of this were happening in that truck because I wasn't in there. But he was somehow holding his body high enough in his seat for us to see his dick while still driving. It's hard to describe what it feels like when you're a victim of different forms of sexual aggression. It's mostly treated as a running joke in our society. But when you experience it, it is very unsettling. Imagine if you are in your own world and you are going about your day, inside of your own world, and then bam, unwanted dick right in your face. It immediately takes you out of the safety you felt the second before it happened. And you suddenly feel very unsafe. Not to mention, there's always some feelings of shame, embarrassment, and uncleanliness that goes along with it. My mom told me to stop and call the cops, but he exited as soon as I picked up the phone. And we didn't get a license plate number, and we sure as shit weren't stopping in New Mexico to file a police report. Alas, that sweaty dick flasher got to go on showing his junk to unsuspecting victims another day. Of course, all the commotion woke my brother back up, who jokingly said, "Well, maybe if you weren't dressed like a slut." But I wasn't. I was 250 pounds, wearing an oversized t-shirt and jeans, because sexual predation doesn't discriminate. Thank you.
Oh, shit. What just go? The story is called, this is real. This is a real accident. Okay. A rumination on 6th grade English.
I've always had an advanced vocabulary. That's not me aggrandizing, that's just candor. I was always the teacher's pet, not only because I had an advanced lexicon, but also because I listened to teachers and did my work, which apparently aren't normal characteristics of middle schoolers. While most of my teachers liked me, the feelings weren't always reciprocated. Luckily, I'm pretty great at pretending to not despise people when I need to. So problems usually didn't arise, except in 6th grade English class with Mrs. Hoffman. You see, as a 6th grader, I was fully aware that my speech was unusual. Advanced may be a more diplomatic term. I was aware that most kids my age didn't know the words I knew. That was fine. An English teacher not knowing them? I think they should. But what takes an unlettered teacher from being inconvenient to inexcusable is their condescension. Mrs. Hoffman was the southern version of a northeastern socialite. The first book we read with her was Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None, which is one of my favorite books, actually. Growing up reading Agatha Christie is probably one of the only reasons I'm so paranoid. But that's neither here nor there. Our first assignment with the book was to read chapter 1 and circle the words we didn't know. Being the good student that I was, I did exactly as I was told. In class, we were listing the words we didn't recognize, and Mrs. Hoffman was writing them on the board. How about you, Addison? What words did you circle? You're quieter than you usually are. She sachets over to my desk, and before I can respond, she's yanked the book out of my hand and is flipping through it. Why on earth did you do the assignment? I'm sorry, Mrs. Hoffman, I did. I didn't find any words that I don't know. She turns on the heel of her stiletto and marches back to the board. That's when things got strained. She points to the first word on the board and glares expectantly. Addison, would you care to define these? Yes, Mrs. Hoffman. An abode is a place of residence, like a house. Illegible. Like your class structure. I thought, but didn't say. Not clear enough to read. Communion. An exchange of intimate feelings and thoughts, unless used in a religious context, then it refers to a specific action in the church. Basque.
to lie in and enjoy warmth, usually of the sun. Correspondent, a person who writes letters. For Mrs. Hoffman, that was probably the devil himself. This continued for the rest of class period. I usually try to give people a chance. Maybe she was having a bad day. Maybe a lot of students made that claim to avoid doing homework. I don't know. But by the time the bell rang, vengeance was vowed. Being the goody two-shoes books are my only friend's child that I was, vengeance didn't mean action. Vengeance meant being myself. Unfiltered, atypical, words and all. Specifically, words Mrs. Hoffman didn't know. The first word I slipped in to class discussion was milieu. Mrs. Hoffman was taken aback, but otherwise didn't react. I used plethora next. But she was able to figure that one out from context. This went on for weeks. It was the word cognizant that finally got her. I don't remember what we were discussing. I don't remember the sentence either. But what I do remember was Mrs. Hoffman's reaction. Her face changed colors like a time-lapse sunset. The first color was a shade of pink, only found in a Chanel perfume commercials. Then her face brightened to the shade of red that socialites always wear to the Met Gala. In true Mrs. Hoffman style, her flushed face matched her shoes. Maybe she knew this moment was coming. I've had quite enough of this, Miss Addison. I'm sorry, Miss Hoffman. What's wrong? You know exactly what you're doing, and I'm sick of it. I'm truly sorry, Mrs. Hoffman. You're going to have to elucidate further. Stop using words that you don't know to make yourself feel superior. In retrospect, I'd like to offer some kudos to Mrs. Hoffman for using a polysyllabic word. Mrs. Hoffman, I don't use words I don't know. I don't not know them. If I don't know them, then you don't know them, Addison. Yes, Mrs. Hoffman, I apologize if I was being perceived as ill-mannered. I am only attempting to proliferate the inventory of my vernacular. The beauty of this feud was that she couldn't send me to the principal. First off, she didn't know what I was saying. So she couldn't exactly report it. Second off, an English teacher getting a kid in trouble because they were using big words isn't an ideal situation. So you may prefer $5 words or 50-cent words, but outsmarting my 6th grade English teacher was definitely priceless. And hey, just because I like using big words doesn't mean I'm above wordplay. Thank you.
Pale, ugly, crazy Cris stood before us on a bed with his arms outstretched, saying, "Vegas, baby, we doing it right, baby. Vegas, baby, baby." He danced a most disgusting dance. We were in a hotel room in Las Vegas, surely doing it wrong. Now, we called Crazy Cris because Cris was crazy. I watched him smoke crack once. But that was later. That was after I let him fly me to Las Vegas on a Sunday afternoon, which is what this story is about. Now, Crazy Cris lived in a dorm. He was wealthy. Very wealthy. Which is why he could fly people around wherever and whenever he wanted to. The weekend before, he'd flown some other people in our dorm to LA, where they apparently drank an entire bottle of vodka on the plane and blacked out at the airport. Riveting. Crazy Cris was once a straight-laced, promising teenage tennis player, ranked in the top 10 for his age group, well on his way to entering a professional tennis career. But one day, he went to a tournament in Las Vegas, and he met a stripper, and she showed him what meth is, and he disappeared for 2 weeks with her, and that was the end of his potential professional tennis career. So on a Sunday afternoon, he asked us if we wanted to fly to Las Vegas, and we said yeah, and so we did. When we landed and left the Las Vegas airport, Crazy Cris took us straight to the liquor store to get some Bacardi that has lots of alcohol in it and is supposed to light on fire, and then you're supposed to drink it while it's on fire, which sounds pretty dangerous because, fuck, it is. He demanded we do flaming shots in our hotel room, and then he caught his face on fire trying to do it. And we took a video of it, and we watched it like 100 times. He didn't get badly burned or anything, so it was very funny. I took a shot of that was not on fire, because you can't spell Las Vegas without safety first. Lisa, who I dated either before or after this story, was hungry, so we set out for the Chinese buffet that was on our hotel pamphlet. Now, I broke up with Lisa while she was getting arrested for a DUI, which was either before or after this story. But time is weird, dude. I mean, that's a thing people on drugs say. On the way to the Chinese buffet, Crazy Cris jokingly picked up a bunch of those prostitute cards they hand out. But then he stuck them in his pocket in a very non-joking way. I thought nothing of it. Ian, who was an idiot and way too old to be in college and was a total creep and also dated Lisa, either before or after this story, had smuggled acid under his balls on the plane. I didn't think having drugs was important enough that you would go through security and risk a felony, but hey, you miss all the shots you don't take. Like the flaming Bacardi ones. The Chinese food was disgusting, but Las Vegas is also disgusting. So that was probably just normal Chinese food. I wonder what their bad Chinese food was like. I mean, that's got to be pretty bad. The cigarettes were really expensive. What a racket. So we went back to the hotel. We smoked weed out of an apple. We took the acid that had been taped to Ian's balls. I hope there wasn't any ball residue or anything on that acid. Not that it matters now. Ian and Lisa and I said that we had plans to go out and see the city because that's what people do in Las Vegas. Or at least in movies where people do drugs in Las Vegas. And Crazy Cris said he'd seen all that shit before and he just wanted to party at the hotel room. Bryce, who was another person with us and who was also an idiot and a bro, wanted to stay with him. I guess to party in the hotel room. Weird. And we went and we walked through the casinos, getting free drinks and smelling the disgusting odor of years of indoor smoking. The old factory burial ground, littered with ignorance and decay that haunts our wounded nation. We put on sunglasses, because that's the cool thing to do on drugs. Ian, who was an idiot, was our tour guide. He knew where to find the tigers. Oh, man, the white tigers, the regular tigers. I mean, all the tigers. And probably also a camel. Or if not a camel, at least a llama. Yeah, and the lights. Ooh, and the other lights, and the other lights. And really, wow, that's all there is. There's just a lot of lights. And also camels, which is cool. It's awesome. And we drank a ton of beer. And for some reason, when you take acid, you can drink as much beer as you want and remain as sharp as an arrow. An arrow that thinks that just staring at light bulbs is super cool. So basically a moth. You're a moth. A moth that can drink a lot of beer. So we did that for like 6 or 7 hours. And it was memorable enough for me to write a story about that, but I guess not memorable enough for me to remember what happened. But moths that can drink beer, that's a funny thing to imagine. They keep hitting the light because they're drunk, and they keep doing it, and they're all like, oh my God, I'm so wasted. I can't stop bumping into this light. This is hilarious. And then some of them get burnt to death. Crazy Chris called us, sounding pretty crazy. He said, we got 10 bitches up in here, man. They're like totally down to party. And you're out there with the credit card. Y'all need to get your ass back in here before I cancel your plane tickets home. I will leave your asses here if you don't come back right now. He probably needed that credit card to have sex with those prostitutes. I didn't know prostitutes took credit cards. I'm sure they take Square now. Ooh, man, was he angry. And we were having an okay time. We decided we would buy some more Bud Light and make our way back. Almost finished on our journey, we stopped to watch some dumb shit on a it's the acid. To watch some dumb shit on a pirate ship where strippers danced in pirate outfits on a big boat in front of cool lights and a crazy water show. It was pretty cool. So we sat there watching this pretty cool, really dumb shit. There was a nice Chinese couple next to us. They didn't speak much English, but somehow I managed to communicate through gestures that I wanted to hold their baby. And they were cool with that, which is pretty fucked up. I got someone to take my photo with the baby, and I handed it back to them. Oh, Jesus. We went back to our room, fearing a most intense confrontation. Had he canceled our tickets? Was he violent? Was he crazy? Was he crazy violent? We opened the hotel door and found them laying there, passed out, next to a large empty pizza box with their fancy shirts stained with pizza grease and liquor. They woke up, and Crazy Chris told me that they had some hot bitches, approximately 10 hot bitches up in there, and had a fun night of partying, and that I should take an Adderall and keep drinking beer so I could keep partying. So I did, and stayed up with Lisa drinking Bud Light in a bubble bath with her clothes on until the morning. And I had a panic attack and used the hotel computer to send one of my professors a 5,000-word email about why I was missing class the next day because I was not fucking around at whatever funeral I made up that I was missing my quiz for. Then we hung out at the pool, and I cried a lot and felt scared of the patio furniture and thought everyone was out to kill me. So we came home. And one of us probably dated Lisa. Or both. Or maybe that was before. I don't know. Crazy Chris, well, he probably went on to law school. And probably makes more money than me and is most likely still pale and ugly and dumb. But I'll never know. Unless I check his Facebook. Which I don't want to do. Because Facebook is the worst. I mean, come on. Like when they show me ads for things I've already bought. Look, man, I already bought that. I'm not going to buy it twice. Fucking idiots. Thank you. Oh, jeez. On weatherproofing and humility. I emerged from my early afternoon shower, steamy and scrubbed, put on my summer weight robe and staggered into my darkened bedroom. I'd just gotten back from a punishing leg day at the gym. Squats upon calf raises upon squats. As a result, I was walking around my apartment, if you could even call it walking, like a newborn deer. Shuffling gingerly is perhaps the better description. Regrettably, I'd made the mistake of walking around the men's locker room barefoot, and I felt positive that I'd picked up some sort of horrible foot fungus. But I'm the proactive type, so I made sure to stop by the Walgreens downstairs from my apartment on the way home and pick up some Mycotin antifungal spray for my feet and flip-flops. With my bedroom lights off and the shades drawn, I shuffled to my dresser and picked up the short can of antifungal and gave my sandals a thorough spray. I then gingerly lifted up my feet and made sure to spray the soles of my feet and all in between the toes. Strange, I thought. This feels greasier, even wavier than I expected. Perhaps this is what the extra strength version feels like. I'll admit that I was also dealing with some jock itch at the time, owing mostly to the increased time at the gym and the fact that I'd been, on average, a lot sweatier than usual over the last 6 weeks. But I was down 10 pounds and feeling great. I felt like I'd walked straighter, like I was even feeling confident enough to ask out the cute little blonde in my Spanish Civil War literature class. We were going out Friday night, and if this was the major trade-off, well, then so be it. So I gave my crotch a hefty dusting of the extra-strength Mycotin as well. I didn't much care for that greasy, almost waxy feeling, but the can assured me that it was quick drying. Get both sides, lift the sack, give it another spray, and done. I turned to put the spray back on the dresser and set it down right next to a can of the exact same size that, even in my darkened room, was well enough marked that I could read the label, Extra Strength Mycotin. Wait, what? Then what the fuck did I just spray on my flip-flops, feet, and crotch? I limped over, flipped on the light switch, and turned over the can as I was holding. Totes Leather Weatherproofing Spray, it read. I bought the stuff for my leather shoes months ago and had completely forgotten about it. And now I just weatherproofed my balls. Panicked, I turned over the can to read the instructions. Clean and dry leather completely, spray from 6 to 8 inches away and let dry for at least 1 hour. Okay, so I should have at least an hour before this stuff sets completely, right? I could only hope. I got back in the tub and tried to remove the waxy coating with warm soap and water. No dice. The water slid right off the layer of weatherproofing spray like water off weatherproofed leather. Eventually, using a pumice stone, I managed to remove the waxy coating from the soles of my feet without too much difficulty. But what to do about my balls? I had been liberal, to say the least, with the application and had gotten the spray all up in there. I suppose it goes without saying that the pumice stone was not an option here. So I began shaving. Well, really clipping, and clipping, and clipping, and then shaving. This took care of some of the issue, but the waxy layer still coated large swathes of the area and remained stuck to any and all that hair that remained. I considered going downstairs to the Walgreens and getting some hair removal spray, but in a moment of clarity realized this might be the only way to make the situation worse. I ended up confirming this a month later in an unrelated situation. I began scrubbing, and scrubbed from penis to tweenus with little efficacy. It was almost like this spray was meant to stick to skin and not come off easily. Eventually, small splits in the coating had formed, and I was able to start the long, arduous, and not exactly painless process of peeling the coating from the skin, one small strip at a time. I must tell you that any and all newfound sense of confidence sat in the drain with the hair and weatherproofing as I sat there, naked and pruny, in the tub under a slow, warm trickle of water, scrubbing and peeling my scrotum. Though I secretly wondered what it would be like to try to sex with a waterproofed wiener, the thought of presenting it as an option to the girl in Spanish Civil War literature simply was not an option. After about 3 hours in the bathtub, with the hot water long gone, I was exasperated and desperate to try anything else. The weatherproofing was essentially a wax, I reasoned. So how do you remove a wax? Why, with heat, of course. I looked up, and the hairdryer's siren's song beckoned to me. What did I have to lose? I sighed, stood up, toweled off, and fired up the Conair hairdryer to medium power. And so I began blow drying. At this heat level, it wasn't unpleasant, but it wasn't terribly effective either. Max power. I looked down to see my member fluttering violently in the hot air stream. This was significantly less pleasant and a lot more singy burny. Alternating with the hot air and soapy water, I managed to remove a significant section of weatherproofing and singe a little bit of the stubble that remained. Many months would pass before some of the patches completely recovered. And so this became my routine for the next week. I would get out of class, go to the gym, and then spend about an hour's worth of me time in the bathroom. I continued to make excuses to the blonde as to why I couldn't come over, and I could tell she was a bit surprised at how adamant I was about taking things slowly. I'm sure there's a lesson here regarding something about an ounce of prevention, but this really does seem like a situation with limited overall life applicability. So, I'll end with the more pithy aphorism. Double check before you spray your crotch with anything. Vince Blasco. Thank you.